our Finance Minister, Ofori Atta, is currently making a presentation to investors at the IMF World Bank spring meetings.
Slowdown, accumulation of arrears, a large exchange rate depreciation, a surge in inflation, and dwindling of international reserves. We should note that prior to this, from 2017, Ghana had grown at a 7% rate. Inflation did achieve single digits. At some point, the deficit was kept below 5%, and we had a relatively stable currency. The government's ability to provide for essential services is becoming increasingly constrained. And on top of that, debt has become unsustainable, as confirmed in our latest internal debt sustainability analysis. The current conditions left us with no other choice than to impose on December 19th, 2022, a comprehensive suspension of payments on our external public debts to preserve reserves and help support macroeconomic stability in the process of restoring debt sustainability. In this context, ladies and gentlemen, we requested financial assistance from the IMF July 1st, 2022, and we reached a staff-level agreement on a funded program in December 2022 in record time with a commitment of Government of Ghana. And I want to also at this point thank the IMF team and the IMF management for the excellent cooperation we've enjoyed and their remarkable efforts to ensure a fast-track process for our discussions, which has enabled significant progress so far in restoring our fiscal and economic situation, bringing a lot more calm to our markets. So Ghana has enormous potential and a vibrant economy. The IFC sometimes describes it as the engine being very strong, and we are going through a temporary period of one or two flat tires, and those can be fixed. In actual fact, I was in China 3 weeks ago. The finance minister also reiterated that same sentiment, and that these issues are short-term because he believes that the country's economy is robust and the medium and long-term have great prospects. The program of the IMF that we are having aims at putting our country back on the high growth track of the previous decade, and I am confident we can reach this goal quickly. The staff-level agreement relies on a comprehensive reform agenda aimed at restoring debt sustainability and fostering economic growth through ambitious structural reforms while protecting the most vulnerable segments of our population. Let me be very clear on this matter. The government of Ghana is fully committed to implementing the program as per the staff-level agreement in all its components and as soon as possible. We believe this strong set of policies is necessary to restore sound and lasting growth and get back public debt to a sustainable path. This is the reason we look forward to obtaining a board approval from the IMF as soon as possible. And this will also be in record time compared to experiences of sister countries like Chad, Zambia, Ethiopia, and others like Sri Lanka and Suriname. Our commitment is clear. Critical steps have already been taken to restore economic and fiscal sustainability. In particular, the 2023 budget enacted with a front loading of the fiscal consolidation program. Budget also laid out the principles of our multi-year fiscal consolidation effort, and it has been completed. A few days ago, by supplemental legislative provisions on additional fiscal revenues. This allows us to kickstart ambitious fiscal consolidation program. This program will enhance our domestic revenue mobilization, as evidenced by the increase in VAT rates by 2.5 percentage points. Structural reforms have started to ensure long-lasting fiscal soundness, including notably related to expenditure commitment control. As you can see, we've also made some very difficult decisions, and electricity tariffs alone since August have gone up by 60% to ensure that we have recovery of costs. Continuing monetary policy tightening to bring down inflation is being pursued by the central bank, and a comprehensive set of structural reforms, as I mentioned, notably public expenditure reviews. So we look forward to continuing with our ambitious macroeconomic objectives. Firstly, Ghana is committed to an ambitious fiscal consolidation path of more than 5 percentage points of GDP based on enhanced revenue mobilization. We will aim at reaching 1.5% of GDP primary surplus over the medium term and increase domestic revenues to 18.5% of GDP. Secondly, Ghana, we are committed to ensuring price stability with inflation target below 8% over the medium term, in line with Bank of Ghana's inflation target rate. Thirdly, looking to restore external buffers is one of our key objectives of the economic program, and will target restoring critical levels for gross international reserves covering 3 months of imports by 2026. Finally, we will aim at restoring competitiveness with the objective of having exports over 37% of GDP. We continue to be confident that Ghana offers an open society, lots of optimism into the future, and opportunities for private sector growth. Now, in addition, in February 2023, we successfully completed the first pillar of the domestic debt exchange program. We came to the view, based on the debt sustainability analysis, that there was no alternative to a full domestic debt operation, even if we understood that there are specific risks associated with domestic debt restructuring, notably in terms of domestic financial stability. Through this successful operation, we managed to significantly alleviate the heavy burden created by a relatively large domestic borrowing on our national budget, as well as to contribute to bringing down our total indebtedness to sustainable levels. Average interest on the domestic debt went from 19.1% pre-restructuring to below 10%, and our average maturity was extended from 3.8 years to 8.2 years. Consequently, the domestic debt exchange program will yield debt service savings of some 38 billion over 2023. We present on this slide the snapshot of our domestic debt as at end 2022. The February 2023 DDEP covers 98 billion Ghana cedis of our domestic debt. We expect the rest of our debt instruments to be included in the perimeter of the domestic debt to be exchanged. Our stock of treasury bills is excluded from the restructuring to preserve financial stability and ensure government funding. So our prime objective is to restore public debt sustainability and ensure a full financing of the program. Two key conditions for the IMF board to approve the program and proceed with a much needed financial disbursement under an extended credit facility. This will require, among other targets, bringing the ratio of the present value of our total public debt to GDP to 55% by 2028 and bringing our external debt service to revenue ratio below 18% from 2028. This will also require securing enough financial assistance from our development partners to meet our gross financing needs over the period of the program. This will be of paramount importance to ensure that the IMF program is fully funded. Securing the necessary debt relief from our bilateral and commercial external creditors is a key step in that perspective. The total stock of external debt amounted to 30.5 billion. So far, we've structured the equivalent of 1.6 billion belonging to the non-resident holders of domestic debt. We have 8.8 billion that are held by multilateral development banks and therefore are not being restructured. The remainder of the external debt amounting to 20 billion encompasses 14.6 billion of commercial debt and 5.4 billion of bilateral debt treated under the common framework. We are reaching out to all our external commercial creditors because you are an integral part of the solution to our current economic and financial crisis. We value the long-standing relationships we have with you and appreciate the continuous support you have provided to Ghana. And we look forward to that relationship continuing. The effort now required from all our creditors to support our efforts to reach the debt sustainability targets set by the IMF and the World Bank are very substantial. We are very much aware of it and do not take this lightly. Our assessment, though, is that absent a restructuring of our external public debt, the present value of our total debt to GDP is largely above the 55% target set by the IMF and the World Bank. This was 89% in 2022. And we cannot risk not getting a deal with the IMF if we were to ensure the future of our economy. So in terms of the debt indicators, external debt service to revenues indicator is also largely above the target in 2022 at 28% instead of the 18% threshold that we do intend to meet. Reaching the IMF, World Bank, LIC, DSF targets mostly hinges on fiscal efforts. Indeed, in a no policy change scenario, the present value of total debt to GDP indicator will be on an explosive trajectory and reach 109%. A significant fiscal effort to which we are committed to bring the ratios to 81%, but that will not be enough. The comprehensive domestic debt restructuring will further absorb 10% of GDP. With that, we remain 16% of GDP, still above the 55% target set by the IMF and the World Bank. The residual effort will have to be delivered by our bilateral and commercial creditors to ensure that our debt is back on a sustainable path, that the critical IMF financing is unlocked, and that the current economic crisis is resolved. We sincerely hope that a rapid resolution consistent with reaching the IMF, World Bank, LIC, DSF targets can be attained. We have made significant steps in all fronts, notably related to the domestic debt restructuring being way ahead. We now expect or look forward to the discussions with our international bondholders and other external commercial creditors to work towards a solution to attain the type of stability that will be required for us to create a better future for all of us. We do at this time expect IMF board approval in May at the latest and contemplate a rapid negotiation of a memorandum of understanding with our official creditors. We hope that we could reach an agreement in principle with you, our Eurobond holders, quickly as well, and stand at your entire disposal to move as quickly and cooperatively as possible. We understand that this is a challenging time for all of us, and it is not an easy task for you to commit to offer financial support to Ghana. Please be assured we are fully committed to working with you and your advisors to find a solution that is balanced and equitable for all parties involved. There will be sacrifices all around. There will be burden sharing all around. But this is a rare moment that we can cooperate, an interesting moment where Ramadan, Passover, and Easter are together. We seek your support for this period of peace and a good future. Thank you very much indeed. The Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana technical teams, our financial and legal advisors, Lazard and Hogan Lovells, will be at your disposal to provide support towards a fast-track treatment of our discussions, requests, and the way ahead. These are challenging times for Ghana, challenging times for the world. But with your help, we'll quickly regain our position at the forefront of fast-rising African economies. Thank you very much for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Minister. We have some live questions already on the platform. Maybe just let me take some of them and propose you to provide answers. Maybe the first one is on DDR, domestic debt restructuring. When do you expect to complete the rest of the domestic debt restructuring, especially in terms of pensions, COCOBs, and US dollar bonds? And maybe another one that is on the issue, also domestic issue of IPPs. What is the amount of IPP areas? What is the status of disclosure with IPPs, and how will they impact these targets?
Thank you very much, Thomas. And we will get to this. I think it would be good to have our governor make some comments to kind of round this up, and then I'll proceed. Both of us will proceed over the questions. Mr. Governor.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. Maybe just to, I think that you have covered most of the issues comprehensively, but just for emphasis to go back and focus on some of the areas where the central bank has been working on, and to say that 2022 was a very difficult year for us in Ghana. We had made a lot of progress by 2021, and we had seen inflation in single digits. In June 2021, inflation was around 7.8%. Barely a year after that, inflation had jumped to 29.8%. Similarly, we saw it rising from 9.7% in August 2021 to 2022. We saw it at 33.9%. These significant jumps in inflation reflected the circumstances that we had found ourselves in 2022, particularly the impact of the Russian-Ukraine war and the downgrades to the Ghanaian economy. Fortunately, the central bank has been very focused on bringing inflation down. We have continued to tighten monetary policy, raising the policy rate from 14.5% all the way to 29.5% at the last meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee. And we are beginning to see the results of that. Inflation seems to have peaked. We have seen 3 successive months of drops in the headline inflation from 54% at the end of last year. The latest numbers came in at 45%. And the data also suggests that most of this is coming from more stable non-food prices, in a sense benefiting largely from the monetary policy tightness and the stable exchange rate situation. We are also seeing some stabilization in our core inflation numbers. And then on the real sector, we have seen moderation in economic activity. The bank's composite index showed that economic activity contracted by 7.6%, and also reflecting the improvements in the current account deficit. Broadly, we are making progress in bringing inflation down, and we are confident that by the time the debt is completed, all the anchors that will keep inflation in check will be back at play. Let me move briefly to the impact of the debt exchange. There's been some concern on the impact of the debt exchange on the banking sector, which was generally very sound, liquid, and profitable prior to the debt exchange. Naturally, the challenging operating environment in 2022 has led to an impact on their books. The preliminary assessments made shows that there was some significant losses on account of the impairment of the bank's holdings of Government of Ghana bonds. The central bank has given some regulatory release, which we believe would minimize the impact of these impairments. And then on the external side, we saw a very sharp decline in international reserves. In 2022, we lost nearly $3.5 billion US dollars, reflecting the loss of access to markets that year. Not surprisingly, the exchange rate responded by very large movements. By the first half of the year, we had seen the currency depreciate by nearly 17%. And then in September, we saw a very large depreciation of the currency by nearly 20%. That also seems to have stabilized in the last few months. The currency has become more stable, and then the level of reserve loss has also sort of stabilized, and we are beginning to see some stability in the foreign exchange market. So broadly, I think this is all that I would like to add at this point, that things are looking relatively stable. We believe that the positive conclusion to all of this exchange exercise would add to the improvements in sentiments that we are beginning to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. And I think really the inflation numbers and the sense of stability is a momentum that is picking up. I think when the government, we made the trip to China and had good conversations with the Chinese, was positive for the environment. Parliament also, before Parliament rose, was able to pass the revenue measures. So it brought really a sense of stability into the environment, and there's a lot more confidence in how citizens are projecting into the future. So this has also given a great space for the discussions with the various other key stakeholders within the issue of the domestic debt restructuring, and we are confident that we'll come to agreements with them so that we'll have, much further debt relief going forward. There's an issue, Thomas, you mentioned of the IPPs. The stock of IPP arrears stand at about 1.6 billion US dollars as at the end of 2022. And this is mostly held by resident entities. As such, it is accounted in the DSA as domestic debt and therefore only impacts the present value of total public debt to GDP indicators. However, since it is denominated in dollars, clearing these arrears would have an effect on the foreign exchange availability of the government, and the capacity to clear these arrears will be constrained by the balance of payments over the short to medium term. But we continue to have discussions and are programmed for discussions in the week of the 24th in Accra.
And Minister, maybe a few words on the finalization of the DDR process.
Thank you very much. I think Governor has alluded to this with regards to its impact on our banking or financial sector in general, banks, insurance companies, securities, capital markets, firms. But in the program, so various analysis were done by the Financial Council and also by the central bank of regards to stress tests, etc. And as Governor mentioned, we did support the banks in 2017-2018, about 25 billion Ghana cedis, and created the stability and profitability that they became used to. However, the debt exchange program put quite a bit of stress on them. And we have calculated that we may need a financial stability fund of about $1.5 billion for us to be able to ensure appropriate solvency and liquidity during this difficult period ahead of us. We have fortunately, the World Bank has fortunately agreed to support this fund with $250 million, 250 million US dollars, and government looking at the space we have, also committing about $500 million to that, bringing that to 750 million. This then we are speaking to a number of multilaterals and also our development partners for them to support the funding of the Ghana Financial Stability Fund, so we can ensure that there are no solvency issues and that in the event of liquidity events, we'll have the resources to support them.
Thank you, Minister. Turning to the external debt exercise, there are many questions on the World Bank guaranteed bond. Will Ghana pay the World Bank guaranteed bond, and how will it be treated down the road in the restructuring? Some clarifications are maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, indeed, this is a very difficult situation that we are in. We all know that the World Bank also typically as a PCS or preferred creditor status. But we believe that the nature of the wraparound that we got, the guarantee we got from them, and given our current situation, that we will not be able to really honor honor this bond. We have been in discussions with the World Bank for them to therefore step in to do that. Since we also had agreed that there were no payment on external debts under the perimeter of the debt moratorium. We are grateful to the World Bank. We are confident that we can find a consensual solution for the restructuring of the 2030 Eurobond that will preserve creditor rights while contributing in a fair and equitable way to the debt relief effort that Ghana expects to obtain from the external creditors. So yes, I think the World Bank will step in and then we will work with them for future resolution.
Thank you, Minister. And so turning to the process of the external debt restructuring, there are many questions in principle on the process, and in particular, in your budget speech, you mentioned that bilateral creditors might obtain softer terms, and so there have been many questions related to this statement. Can you comment on this, Minister?
Yeah, I'm not sure that, and sorry if there were, misinterpretations of this, because in the end, we do look at the issue of the net present value effect of whatever we do receive, and as you know, some of these official creditors, we call them, usually are in a variety of projects that are critical for retaining jobs and making sure that the engines of the economy continues to roll on. I just did mention the Financial Stability Fund. So yes, even as we think of a flow process, extending the maturities, extending the moratoria period for them is also potential new money that will be put into things like the Financial Stability Fund and also budget support discussions that will continue to go on. So it will be a net positive for us, and it's just really different ways of ensuring that there's burden sharing, and we all are committed to bringing Ghana back to post-economic period ahead. So our relationship with our commercial creditors is critical as we do plan to come back to international capital markets down the road. I hereby reaffirm our determination to reach a consensual restructuring outcome of our private creditors. Well, great importance to the Republic. We are fully committed to a fair debt treatment among private and official creditors. This is a guiding principle for all of our engagements with our bilateral and our commercial creditors. Thank you very much indeed, and we truly look forward to your support. We still look at Ghana as a society that is open, a society of optimistic and confident people, and a society with opportunities, a unique society in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think we are close to the end of this webcast. Governor, Minister, if you want to add final words, statement. As I mentioned, there are also other questions on the platform that will be answered comprehensively through posted written answers on the website of the Ministry of Finance and the road, and also the slides, the details of the slides. You participants will have the capacity to get them online soon after this presentation ends.
Well, Thomas, just to say that, as I said, 2022 was a very difficult year for us, and we had experienced a significant loss of reserves, about 3.5 billion. Currently, net international reserves is about 2.6 billion. And therefore, this IMF program is designed to help us rebuild foreign exchange reserve buffers. And we know that this is one of the pillars, to support macroeconomic stability. And we are seeking significant liquidity relief from external creditors during this period to attain this objective. Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you, Governor. I think that's really critical, and therefore the need and the sense of fierce urgency to conclude our discussions with the Paris Club for them to then submit the assurances to the fund. I think Ghana has done a number of things. First of all, with regards to the Paris Club, yeah, we did travel to China. We've sought support from India and the Saudis, and then really maintained an open relationship with the club. We did get in to the club, letting them know that we were worried about the track record of the common framework. And I remember one of our cabinet ministers really being worried at cabinet that we might get into this never land of not knowing where we will be. And he ascribed it to a third marriage, he called it. A third marriage because Chad had gone, Zambia had gone, Ethiopia, and a fourth marriage we were coming into. So in his mind, he was asking the finance minister, Mr. Minister, is this just faith and hope over experience? And I said, yes, it is faith. And, but so far, we have had good reception. We really do commend the Paris Club for the sense of urgency and that they have, and we are confident that they will be able to bring the assurances to the bank in the coming week or so. So that's been very good on the official creditor front. And then I just really would like to emphasize that the domestic exchange has been a really grueling and tough exercise. And let nobody leave thinking that we have been soft in there. It created enormous political backlash. Government was, however, committed to it. As you can see, it's almost 38 billion, 34 billion CDs that are going to be saved to give us the fiscal space that is required. So here's a government that was willing to confront these issues to ensure that there was burden sharing. And I think there are few countries that have been able to do that. And I think that's the difference in what is also encouraging the IMF to believe in our commitment and also move forward quickly with this. So we are confident that with what we have done, coming to an SLA very quickly, being able to get through the prior actions of the revenue issues through through the legislature, and literally ticking all the boxes that we up to, with the engagement with the Paris Club, also looking really positive. We just have set the stage, and therefore, if you join us in this, you really will help us build a robust economy and come back and be able to resume a partnership with you on the international markets. So once again, appreciation and really looking forward to our engagements in the next few days and weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Let's have faith in this process. I think we are starting on a good footing. Thank you to all participants. This is the end of this webcast, and we will look forward for further engagement down the road. Thank you very much.
So welcome back to our coverage of the IMF World Bank Spring meetings, which currently are underway in the US of A. The Ghana's Finance Minister, Ken Ofori Atta, has been making a presentation to Ghana's external creditors, asking them to come on board to help the country restructure its debt in a bid to secure a $3 billion facility from the IMF to help bring back the economy of Ghana. Now, the Finance Minister has been enumerating several factors that affected the economy in from 2020 that has led the country to where it is, citing COVID-19 and its impact on the economy. He talked about the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 and how it impacted the economy of Ghana. He also spoke about talks with China and how it's going. Also made mention or spoke about Ghana's local domestic debt exchange program that has seen a lot of government bondholders joining a program to say that we would give government the room to operate. Now, what we need is our external creditors also coming on board to give Ghana that fiscal space to then, with the support of the IMF, bring back the economy. Now, we've listened to that presentation. George Wiafe, who is with Joy Business, is live in US where the meeting is ongoing. He will be joining us, with some update from there as well. But in-house, our data and research analyst, Isaac Ofieje, has been listening in to this presentation, and he is also here with me in the studio to help us break down all the issues that the Finance Minister brought up to you. Now, the Finance Minister basically is asking the external creditors to also come on board to help revive the economy of Ghana. Now, he said one thing which is striking, that with their support, Ghana can still come and take its position as a forerunner in growing economies in Africa and in the world. But how will this happen? And he again said something about when we expect this IMF deal to happen. Now, what he said is that we expect, and this is a quote from him, we expect an IMF board approval in May in the latest. So that now we probably are seeing when we should expect this whole thing going through. Isaac Ofieje is here with me. Isaac, welcome. Now, he says that in the latest, we should be expecting a deal in May. Is that something we've anticipated all this while?
Yeah, so before, the Finance Minister spoke, the IMF boss has also been addressed in the press. And when the question was put to her that when is government of Ghana getting the $3 billion bailout package, she came out to say that, look, we are very, very optimistic that Ghana will get a bailout package very soon. She didn't put timeline to it, but the Finance Minister is very confident that probably by the end of May, we may get the $3 billion bailout package. This is because if you look at this whole, IMF bailouts, it's different from what we had in 2015. In 2015, there wasn't anything like debt restructuring because our debt at that moment was sustainable. This moment, we have unsustainable debt, so it has become a condition for us to restructure not only domestic debt, but also external debt as well. We've been able to do that of domestic, debt. It's now time to do the restructuring of the external debt. what has been the obstacle or the missing component in this whole debt talk has been China. And then the fact that multilateral or the West are saying that without China at the negotiation table, we will also not participate in this whole restructuring. So Ghana took first step in talking to China, and the finance minister is confident that China is ready to come to the negotiation table. And this has opened, the gate for other, creditors to come on board.
Okay, I'll come to you shortly, but let me take you to the US of A and engage George Weafe. George, grateful that you could join us here. Now, the finance minister has been talking to this creditor. Now, he says that he knows it is a difficult situation for the creditors to agree to come on board, but they can be rest assured that they are ready to work with the advisors to reach a conclusion on this. What has been happening at the sidelines after this particular meeting, George?
And Kojo, you're right on that one. And this was more of a private engagement with those who have invested in the Eurobonds and other investments as well. And what kind of assurance is the minister going to give them? Yesterday, I remember I met someone who had participated heavily in Ghana's bonds, and he was concerned more about the outlook. You get the understanding that a lot of these persons still have some hope in Ghana in terms of things turning around. So the IMF is not just also engaging the bilaterals, but in terms of the whole debt framework that has been put together, how they can also convince these private creditors to also come on board to participate in this whole debt restructuring program. And talking about that IMF MD press briefing, you get the understanding from the posturing, if I can use that expression, from the IMF MD that if, for instance, Ghana's program should come to the board today, we will do it ASAP. And again, if you engage other investors and all the other partners, what you get is that if you hold all these factors constant, and even away from before the minister spoke, that Ghana is likely to get the program in the middle or the latter part of May. And that is what you're picking up from the IMF, the World Bank, but that is subject to getting this whole financing assurance deal concluded as soon as possible for them to go through all the departments. And again, you get the understanding that it appears that Ghana may enjoy some waivers, so this program can quickly come to the IMF board for them to approve it. Again, the IMF MD has been criticized several times about remarks on Ghana with respect to what has caused the problem. Today, at their briefing today, she also echoed that point again, that she still believes firmly that the current challenge that Ghana is going through is not really as exclusively as a result of mismanagement of the economy or just internal, but external issues have also contributed to Ghana's situation. And she believes that then all the partners need to come on board to help Ghana come out of this crisis. And that is why you see that optimism engaging the US government here, some officials engaging other multinationals as well. You get the understanding that we want to help Ghana come out of this crisis. So maybe the biggest challenge now is getting China on board and also being able to convince all these private creditors to come on board in restructuring Ghana's debt.
Well, the minister said that the domestic restructuring will absorb some 10% of GDP. Now, it still remains with some 16% of GDP above the target set by IMF and the World Bank. And he said it was, this is about burden sharing. So the Euro bond holders understand that our call to them is about sharing this burden with us. But from their body language and interactions after the minister made the presentation, how does it come across to you? Is there a willingness to say, let's play ball?
I mean, if you speak to everyone, and I'm just saying that for off record, on record, you get the understanding that they believe in the future of Ghana. They believe they think that the outlook is not that bad. Look at the true World Bank and the IMF report that they put out. In terms of 2024, growth is going to pick up. Inflation is going to slow further to 15. If any investor is looking at these indicators, obviously there is light at the end of the tunnel. And for every long-term investor, they are not short-termist. You're looking at the next 5 years, the next 10 years. So if all these indicators by independent actors points to the economy picking up next year, then obviously they are prepared to take the necessary sacrifices now to try and stabilize things. So that is what you get here, that the outlook is good, the outlook is solid. It is just more of a short-termist challenge, and therefore they are committed. These private investors think that, listen, get this IMF program, then we are sure that you should also be committed to fiscal discipline, because that is very critical. What are you doing in your country to ensure that you also raise the required revenue as well? So the body language seems to suggest that they believe in the outlook. They think that this is just a short-termish thing, and things should pick up quickly going forward.
Interesting. At this same time, when Ghana's finance minister was having this interaction with the Euro bond holders, the IMF was also having, the MD, Kristalina Georgieva, was having an address at the sidelines. What do you pick from there as well in terms of how, Ghana is doing in terms of getting these external creditors to come on board? We understand that, yes, they have the tendency to come on board and all of that. But from this meeting, do we have the sense that, well, things will strike out very, very soon? The minister says by May. Is that an assurance there?
Before the minister came with this assurance, if you read all the economic intelligence report, if you engage all the partners, it was clear. It's now that it has come out. Now, from all these partners, they were thinking the May, maybe the latter part of May, for this program to be approved. And Brace, let me just run you through something here. If Ghana gets, and don't forget, Kojo, that what the IMF board or their staff are looking for is just an assurance. It's not about concluding discussions with these creditors, the Paris Club and China. If they get that assurance that they are committed to participating in Ghana's financing program, that is enough to go to the board. But we understand that, for instance, if the program is ready today, it should take about 6 weeks to go through the African department, to go to the legal and all the rest. Don't forget, the IMF is very, very cautious here that, listen, we don't want to rush things so that 2 years from the program or 3 years, we'll say that, listen, look at you guys, what did you leave? And that is why they are also pushing for those structural reforms as well. So it is not just about the blank check. Yes, we are willing to help you, but also put certain things on the table that will lead to those structural reforms, and not just about, oh, Ghana is in crisis, let's help it. What are you doing in the area of revenue? What are you doing in the area of expenditure? Put in place the required laws. And that is why, for instance, the IMF would always push that every agreement that they reach with a country, it goes to Parliament and gets a parliamentary approval. So this is not the approval that the fund is looking for from the Minister of Finance or the Governor of the Bank of Ghana. Every deal we reach.
Well, that's our colleague George Weafe live from Washington, D.C., where this World Bank IMF spring meetings are currently ongoing. Yeah, George, you're back. Your line got frozen a bit, but you're not back, so if you can make the point to make it. All right, so we'll try and rectify the line there with George Weafe so that we can bring you, continue that looking at the aftermath of this particular meeting that the Finance Minister of Ghana, Ofori Atta, had with Eurobond holders. The Kofi J is still here. Kofi J, there's one bit that the Eurobond holders were critical about finding about what the IPP arrears amount to, and how, when we're going to finish the domestic debt restructuring, particularly with that on board. The finance minister says, well, the arrears is around 1.6 billion, as of the end of 2022. But this is mostly held by resident entities. We also understand that the IPPs have said we are not going to be part of. With the response he gave, how do we, how can we be rest assured that the Eurobond creditors would say that, okay, we are willing to go on, even though he says that way it's about some 1.6 billion how will they be rest assured that the money that we'll get we won't use to settle these debts?
Well, look, so the IPP debts are actually held in the domestic market, but are held in dollar-denominated, notes. That is the reason why we could not include them in the domestic debt exchange program. So the finance minister was very clear. There's a special program for these, independent power producers. But their message is very, very simple to the finance ministry. Look, they said they do not want to participate in any form of debt restructuring. All they want is disbursements of their money, debt servicing. They don't want to be included in any debt restructuring. But the Eurobond players are concerned because you are going to service this debt in dollars. So it means if we give you this fiscal space and you're going to use it to pay another person, then we should be concerned because you are talking about burden sharing. So if it is burden sharing, how about IPPs that their debt stock is around almost 2 billion Ghana cedis? Mind you, we are going to get 3 billion from the IMF and IPPs about 1.6 billion. That's more than half the amount we are getting from the IMF. And if you look at our data annually, we rack up about $1 billion in terms of the energy sector, debt. And for excess capacity alone, we are paying close to 500 million Ghana cedis just because we produce the power, we are not able to use it, and we have to pay because it's take or pay. And the last time I checked, we have about 14 of these power purchasing agreements in place that we are still operating. So the Eurobond creditors will be concerned because the debt stock to these people is so huge, very significant, about $2 billion that if you want us to do burden sharing, then include IPPs. But they've been very clear. They're telling the finance ministry they don't want to be included in any form of debt restructuring.
Okay. George Yafe is back on the line. George, you were making a point when your line tripped, but if you can add this to it, with the response the minister gave in relation to the IPP's arrears or debt, if you look at the body language, how satisfied were these Eurobond holders as to how the finance minister answered the question about the impact of the arrears of IPPs on our domestic debt? George, kindly unmute so we can follow what you're telling us. Okay, all right. So that we're still on the IMF World Bank spring meetings where a while ago Ghana's finance minister Ken Ofori Atta and the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, have been meeting with Eurobond holders to get them to come on board as external creditors to help us secure this $3 billion facility from the IMF. You know already that Ghana has completed a domestic debt exchange program. What is now left is for us to get our external creditors to come on board to give us that room so that the IMF can then be rest assured that the money that they will give us, we won't spend them on paying debt. Well, George, the line dropped off a bit, but once you're back, kindly add this. The finance minister responded to a question about the arrears that we owe the IPPs. If you look at the body language of the Eurobond holders, how satisfied were they with the response the finance minister gave? And in wrapping up your comment today, if you can add it to us. George, if you're with me, I'd want to find out from you how the Eurobond creditors took the response in relation to the impact of the arrears of IPPs to our public debt.
Kojo, you can hear me?
I can hear you now. So you're still watching JoyNews, and we're still talking about the finance minister's meeting with our Eurobond creditors. Isaac Ofori is still here with me, and George Yafe is is joining us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. George, I can hear you now. So if you got my question earlier, let's understand how the Eurobond creditors took that. And don't forget to unmute so we can follow what you're telling us.
They still want some further.
Okay. All right. So but Kofi, Dr. Addison also came on board with, what we've been able to do locally to ensure, to give that confidence to our external creditors that, look, we are ready to ensure that we get out of where we are. He mentioned monetary tightening measures, which is leading to stabilization of inflation. He said that Ghana is making progress in bringing inflation down, and they are confident that by the time this is done, the economy will be on a footing that will be part of the fastest growing economies. How do you see that one? Is that really why we're seeing what we're seeing?
Well, it was an opportunity to paint the positive picture that we see in the last few months, where we've seen inflation moving from a peak of 54.1% to now 45%. Remember, to move from 45 down to from 54 to 45 is a very significant step. And then he's making the point that, look, we do not even have the IMF executive board approval, but we've been able to achieve this. If you look at the CD, it is not, depreciating at the rate that it used to depreciate last year. If you look at what the CD started off at the beginning of the year and where we are currently, per the analysis or the computations we did, the CD has gained more than 25% of its value. Inflation is coming down. So many things, working out, in the economic space of Ghana. So he's saying that we don't have the approval, but locally, we are also putting in place measures to make sure that when we have the financial space or the fiscal space, we'll be able to utilize it to get the economy back to a healthy trajectory, so that the assurances that we've given you that give us space to pay your money, we'll be able to do that. But he also made a very critical point about the performance of, banks as a result of this domestic debt exchange program. And he was very categorical that they've done a personal assessment of the books of some of these banks, and I've come to realize that because of the DDEP that was carried out, some banks had a negative impact on their balance sheet, but they are on standby with some form of support to make sure that these banks that have been affected by the DDEP will not face insolvency. But Bank of Ghana is on standby to make sure that they are in a good position. And he's been making a whole lot of points about the monetary policy.
Exactly. We'll come there. George is joining us again. George, your line is okay now. Welcome back. You were making a point about the Eurobond creditors wanting more when the answer was given to them about the impact of the IPP's arrears.
So, Kojo, I hope the line is better now and you can hear me. If it's right, I can go. So what I was explaining, that they also wanted some assurances in terms of what is government financing situation going forward. And how is government going to manage the economy? There are still more engagement going on. This was just a formal engagement. There are normal B2B engagement going on what government is going to do to address all their concerns that they are raising with respect to the economy, revenue and expenditure, and improving the fiscal situation.
Interesting. But once this is a meeting that is still ongoing, even after meeting the Eurobond investors, this spring meeting is still ongoing. Our aim there is to ensure that Ghana is getting the creditors, the external creditors, to come on board here. Now, after the whole engagement with the Minister of Finance, you are there. You could better let us understand whether they were okay with all the responses. You've already told us that with the IPPs, they still want more. But is that more in terms of the entire economy or on that alone? Or when, after listening to the minister, they feel that, well, we are very okay with all the answers that we've gotten?
Kojo, if you can hear me, and this is one of several engagements that are expected to go on. So this is one of it, and other engagements are also ongoing to convince all these creditors and partners about what government is doing to try and stabilize the economy.
Interesting. So, are we aware of any more meetings that the finance minister and the team have to, undertake or partake in to ensure that it's getting closer, it's getting us closer to getting this deal with the IMF?
Of course, and for me, and Kojo, I followed the fund for quite a while, and the posturing and the opening comment by the MD seems to suggest that if this program should get to the IMF board, I doubt whether there will be any delay. I mean, to have the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and for the fact of all these comments putting that, Charlie, bring the thing to us, we are helping you, we're going to help you. So you get the understanding that indeed, and even before the minister spoke, we all knew that this program will be approved somewhere in May, and maybe the latter part of May. So there are several meetings. There's a meeting with the African Development Bank boss. There are other partner investment meetings that are supposed to go on. There's a high level, a launch of a report task force on climate change and development. And all these things are going on. And the economists will say, unless something happens, all other things being equal, we are now working, or Ghana is now working towards getting a deal in May next month.
Interesting. Well, I'm here with Isaac Ofori Atta. He has a question for you, George. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask George about, the still the IPPs. And then the fact that if the Eurobond creditors are very confident that government will be able to reach an agreement with them, because they've been very, very, vocal with their point, saying that we don't want any form of restructuring. But the finance minister is saying that we have a special program for you to come and participate. What is the special message that, the finance minister wants to put across to these IPPs? So that's the question I was asking, George.
Well, Kofi, that has not been officially communicated. He said it's special means it's going to be special, and something that he will tell them off record. But Kofi, don't forget that there's also been a creditor committee formed by some of the Eurobond holders, and they've been engaging government also with respect to. And when a committee is formed, then you know that some progress is being made in terms of restructuring Ghana's debt. Don't forget that even with respect to the Paris Club, they have also formed a partial creditor committee, and the IMF MD even confirmed that next week there's going to be a meeting actually with Ghana. That significant progress being made in terms of restructuring Ghana's debt. So that special thing was not communicated. It appears that will be done privately to them, and if all these actors seem to be whipping line from the IMF, the World Bank, the US government, it appears that someday will be forced through their throats in terms of restructuring these private. These private creditors' debt.
George, with this external credit committee that has been set up by some of our creditors, do you have the sense that they would want to play an active role in determining what we would do to restore the confidence in the economy? All right, George. So I wanted to find out from you, with this creditor committee that they formed.
Could you, just like what happened with the HIPIC relief, you are not going to get a blind check in terms of debt forgiveness and go away. These partners are actively going to have a role in terms of what happens to this money that they are giving us in terms of relief.
Has that, been made clear? Right, so you're still watching coverage of the IMF World Bank spring meetings currently underway in the United States of America. We've brought you that meeting between Ghana's finance minister and his team with our external creditors, specifically the Eurobond, holders. George, yeah, make your point.
To fast track discussions for some.
All right, George, you're making a point when the line tripped there. If you could let us understand, you were talking about in the case of HIPIC, we didn't get a blank check. So it looks like we're not going to get
the creditor committee. You get the sense that they are willing to actually restructure our debt. And possibly look the IMF MD. So yes, I was explaining that just like the
Okay, let's apologize for the intermittent breakages there. We're working with machines, so sometimes once you're not in control, it does happen. So that's how come George's line is quite, playing with us today. But so Kofi, we are in this same basket with that of Zambia, but we are focused on ours.
Yeah.
Are we having any sort of, indications as to how Zambia's own is also going? But we want to focus on ours, but they are our brothers and sisters on the same continent. Do we have any sense of how theirs is also going?
Well, so there's a mistake that Zambia made that Ghana doesn't want to, go according to that same trajectory. So with that of Zambia, they had an IMF executive board approval in principle for 1.3 billion bailout package. And what happened was that as at the time that Zambia got that assurance from their creditors and also from the IMF, they had not made significant step in restructuring their external debt, of which China was a major component. And so once the IMF gave them that sort of approval, the first disbursement, which was around $188 million, they could not get this money because it was contingent on, restructuring, doing actual restructuring, but not just an assurance. So you've heard about, agreements in principle and all that. This simply means that you can have assurance from the Eurobond, from China, from multilateral, from Paris Club, whoever we owe. They can give us this assurance. But once we send this assurance plus some of the revenue and measures we've been able to implement, the domestic program and all that to the executive board, what they are looking at is assurances. They can give you the executive board approval, but actual disbursement will be contingent on you doing the actual restructuring. And that's the mistake Zambia did. They have the approval now, but they can't cash out the money.
Okay.
Because they've not been able to, have actual restructuring with, creditors like China and other, external creditors. We want to make sure that we have an assurance and also a roadmap that will help us do actual restructuring before we even send, the proposal to the board level, so that we don't have to send a proposal to the board level and then come back to do actual restructuring. This spring meeting is an opportunity for us to do everything, because all the finance ministers, all the creditors, everybody is in that same building in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I want to take advantage of this situation and make sure that we do not, go through the same problem that Zambia went through.
One thing that we need to make clear is, are we looking for debt cancellation, or we're looking for them to give us room to then attend to their debt later on? What is it really that we're looking at?
Well, as for debt cancellation, it would depend on the type of creditor you are dealing with. Mind you, before we even started this whole external debt restructuring, the Deputy Finance Minister, John Kuma, said that external creditors were likely to suffer a 30% haircut either on their principal or interest. So if you look at something like that, it means it's not debt forgiveness. It's just saying that I'm supposed to give you, let's say, 50 cedis this month. I can't give you. Can you give me one more year to pay? So it's either you are extending the maturity period, or you are, giving your creditor an opportunity to also, increase the interest rate so that you can extend the maturity period. Okay. I don't know which of the creditors have actually, agreed to do a total debt cancellation for us. All of them will be looking at restructuring. Restructuring in the sense that they're going to give you that space. You are supposed to make, debt servicing. This year we've projected to spend about $54 billion. If you convert it into cedis, around $5.5 billion. We are supposed to dollars actually.
Okay, so $5 billion, but when you bring it to that's around 500 and something
no,
billion.
54 billion cedis. If you bring it to cedi, around $5.4 billion that we are supposed to pay to both, external and then domestic creditors. I was looking at the data, and if you look at Ghana, interest payments alone every year costs us about $1.6 billion. If you add principal payment, we are looking at somewhere $3 billion. So you look at a country like Ghana, and it's supposed to pay $3 billion in 2023. Where are we going to get the money? As a country, our entire, external reserve is about $6 billion. And if you are supposed to pay or service debt of about $3 billion, where are you going to get that from? Remember, we don't print dollars here in Ghana. So look at all of these, kind of disbursements we have to make in 2023 and other years to come. Those are some of the reasons why we decided to default, because we knew once we start to pay, to service people's debt in dollars, we're going to have, a serious challenge on the cedi. Mind you, one reason why the cedi is stable is because we've not done that sort of payment that we used to do some years to come and all that. So those are some of the reasons why, Ghana is seeking to make sure that we have that kind of fiscal space to make sure we accommodate that $3 billion bailout package coming from the IMF. So we don't want to commit the same mistake Zambia did. We don't want to go to the executive board and come back now to do proper restructuring talks. It hurts your economy. You see that your economy will be performing in a very short period of time. It goes back to its default mode. We don't want that. We want a long-term plan. We want to consolidate the gains we are having so that we don't find ourselves 5 or 4 years to come going back to the IMF again.
Okay, interesting. Let's get that from George Wiafe, if he's speaking that sense. George, we've been talking about debt restructuring, and also it gets to a point we replace it with debt cancellation. What exactly are we looking at, and what are some of our creditors telling us? Are they looking at debt cancellation in its entirety, or they are looking at restructuring to say, let's give you space, pay us later? Okay. George, I'm trying to find out from you what exactly our case is looking like. Are we looking at debt cancellation, or we're looking at restructuring? And what are the details? What are some of the creditors also coming on board with? Okay. So okay, so Kofi, if you look at some of the things that the finance minister has been telling the Eurobond creditors, he says that in February 2023, Ghana successfully completed the first pillar of the domestic debt exchange program. Old bonds, which were some 19.1%, that's the coupon rate, has now been restructured. So it's now 9.1%, and it's they're only doing some 5% paid in cash in 2023 and 2024. Average maturity with the old bond, it was 3.80 years. Now it is 8.3 years, restructuring. He says that their participation was around 85%. That's what they are telling Eurobond investors. How will this play a role in convincing them to say, well, if you look at 85% participation, that's huge enough, let's come on board?
The lacuna here is burden sharing. And Ghana is taking lessons from what happened in Zambia. When Zambia began this whole debt restructuring, they started with their external creditors. And they weren't happy at all, because they felt, why do you leave your domestic creditors, come to the external space to do restructuring? So Ghana wanted to create the impression that, come on, we started with our domestic guys. They've given us a participation rate of about 80%. We are doing our homework domestic-wise, and we believe that once we've been able to do this, if you're external creditor, you also come on board, we have good package for you. So this, all the figures you spoke about, the maturity period and then also the interest payment, the coupon payment. And if you do the math, you realize that just like the finance minister said, we'll be saving the economy some 38 billion Ghana cedis. Converted to dollars, it's around $3.8 billion. And this is a good fiscal space for the country. So we don't want to commit the same mistakes Zambia did. That is why we are making sure that our domestic guys are on board before we even move on to talk about external debt restructuring. So we have the fiscal space for ourselves, but mind you, the more we delay at the international front, the more we erase the gains we've been able to gain from the domestic debt exchange program, because we are saving for a certain period of time, and the more we delay, the more the savings we've actually done start to erase. So
interesting. Let's bring in an economist who has been following this particular matter since it started. Professor Bokping is a lecturer at an assistant.
He's a professor, right?
Professor Bokping, yes. He's a professor of finance at the University of Ghana. He joins us now. Prof, grateful that you could join us here. Now, first of all, what do you make of the decision by government to hold this engagement with our Eurobond partners at this IMF World Bank Spring meetings?
Well, I think that on one breath, we can say that it's good news, but on another breath, that is an embarrassment to a nation. That is practically calling all creditors who genuinely lend to that country, hoping that the funds are going to be used well and those monies will be paid back and paid back on time. We're begging and pleading for debt forgiveness. So that is what it is. And I think that in as much as we are talking about fiscal savings and all of that, good news. But remember, that is the sacrifice some people have to make for a country that through corruption, a country that through inefficient and procurement instructions fail to manage its affairs well. So yes, it's good because right now Ghana needs a fiscal savings. What we have seen from the domestic market is not enough. The IMF knows that approving the program, which in itself will just bring $3 billion over 3 years, largely balance of payment support. Approving such a program with that funding gap will not work. And therefore, they require that assurance that Ghana must get funding assurance from our bilateral, multilateral, external, commercial, domestic, more or less. Yes, domestic we are done, external, commercial, yes, we are on it. Yes, but more importantly, our multilateral and bilateral partners coming on board, either in the form of debt relief or fresh funding. Okay, so.
The finance minister tells the Eurobond creditors that they were asking a question about the impact of the arrears of IPPs. And the finance minister says, we have a special program for them. From your understanding of what's happening so far, what will be the impact of these arrears that we owe the IPPs on our effort to get this sort of, or to restructure our debt so that we can get this IMF deal?
You have to come clean when it comes to especially external commercial creditors, because you have to justify that you merit debt forgiveness. You have to justify. You have to be able to prove the assumptions underlying your debt sustainability analysis. In the case of external debt restructuring, it is not as easy as domestic debt restructuring that we went through here. Because with the domestic debt restructuring, because the domestic creditor failed to form one domestic creditor committee, they couldn't negotiate from position of strength. Okay? And in exchange for the fiscal savings, they made no conditions and had no idea how even those fiscal savings will be used by the government. Remember, if we are asking external bilateral to come on board in terms of debt relief or fresh funding, they are certainly going to have a say in how you use the money. They are probably going to ask for certain conditions, even before this. Hello? Even before today's press conference, the German ambassador had hinted that Ghana needed to do something about our legacy debt, energy sector indebtedness, right? And then if you look at, and anybody who understands Ghana's public finance space will tell you that if you pick the 2023 budget, you will see that for the first time in a long while, Ghana has expenditure items for arrears, largely arrears to the independent power producers, arrears in terms of energy sector indebtedness. You check the 2023 budget, that's over 25 billion cedis. In the next 3 years, we are looking at something in excess of 70 billion cedis. So any reasonable creditor with a fair understanding of Ghana's public finance space will ask you questions about this. And that is why it's not only just the external creditors. The IMF itself, knowing this, has made and is making a utility price adjustment as a prior action. Something needed to be done about the energy sector. Remember, the Ministry of Finance had made a proposal to restructure the indebtedness to the IPPs as part of our comprehensive debt restructuring. And there's been a strong pushback.
So it was one of the things that the minister told them about electricity tariff hikes, bringing the cumulative increase to 60% since August 2022. But you say that the presentation was an embarrassment. Why say so? How would you have expected them to carry on this for it not to be an embarrassment?
Look, in as much as we talk about global shocks and all of that, we should know that we are in this state simply because we fail to govern well. Okay, we are a sovereign nation. Okay, we should have some minimum level of pride that makes us Ghanaian, and we should learn a lesson from this, so that we cannot borrow as though there is no tomorrow. We cannot borrow and later hold an international press conference and ask for creditors to come on board and help the country survive. We should know that there are principles underlining lending, that there's nothing wrong to borrow, but you must borrow and you must be ready to pay and pay on time. It should be part of our culture as a nation. We should imbibe in us the principle to manage our resources judiciously. Look at what Ghana is going through just to get an IMF program. Look at the journey we have taken. Okay? Look at the numerous begging we are asking others to beg on our behalf. If you work with any serious organization anywhere in the world today, and you hear that your country is being discussed this way at the IMF level, at the World Bank level, please, will you be happy? You will not be happy. We should be proud about our country. And more so, how many serious countries have gone to the IMF for help? How many serious countries have gone there? Ghana, Malaysia, Singapore. Ghana's GDP per capita in 1960 was higher than South Korea. Ghana in 1950s, early 60s, we were almost at par with Malaysia, Singapore. Check where they are today in terms of income per capita GDP. Check whether they've gone to the IMF. Check the number of times they've been to the IMF. And check how often Ghana has gone to the IMF. And we are going for our 17th program. All that I'm saying is that, yes, a lot has happened. We can move on. But we must contextualize the discussion so that Ghana learns from this and resolve that never again would we embarrass ourselves in front of the whole world in the manner we have done.
But
Look, we should have that minimum standard. We know what level of impact global shocks have had on every country. And we should be able to also know how our own management or otherwise has also exacerbated the situation. It is things like this that countries go through and they resolve never again And that resolve is accompanied by fiscal discipline, lean government, expenditure cuts, generating revenue efficiently, and the redistribution of that wealth resources is done efficiently that can enable inclusive greater economic transformation and inclusive productivity growth. If we fail to learn this, then we will be back on the international stage again, asking for people to come to our aid.
So for you, in order for us to say that we won't be where we are again, what are the things that you expect government to do to then tell us, the citizens, that we are ambitious about our plans to ensure that we don't take you to where we have been before now?
I'm expecting that the minister, when he comes to Ghana, together with the president, will have a national stakeholder forum. Let us let go political pride, tribal, whatever. And let's see how we can foster consensus the way forward for us never to get to this situation again. And that will require honesty and admission. Without that, it's very difficult to accommodate alternative views on the table. We need to do that and cut wasteful expenditure. The German ambassador was telling us that Ghana has more ministries than Germany. How do you make progress with it? You have to be unique to think that you can have this size of government, inefficient state institutions, and all of that, and expect to make it. But remember that where exactly Ghana is, we may be playing according to the scheme that we are just incapable of governing efficiently and effectively, and that these people just maintain a bed for them at the ward. They will show up very soon, either in an ambulance or they will walk in there themselves.
So if this consultative meeting should happen and you are to propose, things that we can do, you've mentioned a lean government, but what sort of proposal will you put on the table as to what government can do to ensure that we are safe?
Look, it will take fiscal side, the necessary fiscal reform. It's going to be painful, but it has to be done. Lean government is going to be painful. It means that we must be willing to trade off political loyalty and patronage for the common good. That will free us some space, and we can invest that in growth-enhancing spending, particularly in the area of agriculture, agribusiness, agro-processing. You need to tackle that and tell yourself that in the next 2 years, we must be food sufficient in ABC. And we must have clear targets and benchmarks. With the necessary efficiency, we have to do that. We are not able to feed our own people. This is a country that is unable to feed its own citizens. Look at food inflation. Inflation has come down to 45%. 45% by world standards is really too high. It's too high. 45% by regional average is too high. 45% compared to our structural peers is very high. Of course, we know that low inflation is desirable in itself as a macroeconomic outcome. But we can't call this one low inflation. We must be intentional about some of the things that we want to do. Where we are, we can solve it if we want to. We are sitting here, the biggest threat to Ghana's future. And the reason we say that Ghana is living less and less sustainable today is Galamsey. In the next 10 to 15 years, you will see what Galamsey alone will do to this country. And we may be at another international stage begging for people to supply us with water and other things simply because you and I, together with everybody else, we are watching and presiding over the destruction of our environment. And today, Ghana is living less and less sustainably because of Galamsey. And that it's more expensive living in some of the rural areas in Ghana today than living in the urban and peri-urban areas because the rural ecosystem that supports life with water as the embodiment has been destroyed. If we allow this to continue like this, in the next 10 to 15 years, where do you think Ghana will be? Who do you want to go and beg one day to come and give you forest when we are presiding over the destruction of our forest through galamsey, and the nation is losing all the tax revenue from the gold being smuggled, and we are told from a certain documentary that $40 million is smuggled out of this country every month. It means that we are losing all the tax revenue. We are losing everything through galamsey. The nation is getting nothing out of the natural endowment that God has given us. The concept of economy in an economist is about an area under the effective economic control of a single government. Do we have control over all our natural resources? And an economy is defined to include both natural resources, the airspace, the enclaves, territorial waters, and all of that. This is what we have. This is what we are exercising greater control over. So we cannot say Ghana has a government. We can't say that we have a government when we see distracting to our forests and the rest of them. We are losing the natural resources. You can't tell me that we have a government. We are almost like a failed state.
All right, Prof. Can you hold the line for me? Let me take you to the USA, where my colleague, George Oyafe, is at this particular IMF World Bank Spring meeting. George, so I was asking a question about this creditor committee that has been formed and whether you get the indication that they want to play active roles in trying to restructure our economy, trying to bring back the economy to where it used to be. George, kindly unmute so we can follow what you're telling us.
As I explained to you earlier on, just like what happened with the IMF relief, the HIPIC relief, these countries actually were assisted or had a role to play what happened. Don't forget when even the money was used, those like even a KVIP, we saw something being painted on that HIPIC benefit. It is not going to be a blind check. They are actually going to ensure and have a say in what this relief that they are giving it to us what are you going to use it to do? Where are you going to advance it? And that one is what we've taken up from here. So it is not going to be a blind check. It will come with some strict conditions on what this relief will mean to us in the economy. And that is why a creditor committee has been established, and it's a partial one. China is not part of that committee for now because of concerns about whether it is fair that if they are being asked to restructure the debt or forgive Ghana debt. What about other multinationals as well, multilateral institutions? Because they argue that, for instance, the China Exim Bank is also Ghana is indebted to the Exim Bank. So those discussions are going on right now. But as we speak right now, the partial creditor committee that has been formed, that could be meeting next week, is without China. But the Paris Club, they are going ahead to engage Ghana, and they will ensure that those concerns are addressed. And if there should be a debt cancellation, where or how are these monies going to be used? And that is why they're also pushing for some laws in the area of revenue. Because just like what Prof. Bobkin has said, I mean, if you are sick or if you have a challenge and you are not showing commitment, I mean, I stand to be educated, and maybe Prof will help me out. Having followed this fund for a while, I've never come across a country that has requested for a program where the fund, the World Bank, the US government, all appear to be giving signals that we want to help you come out of your current challenge. But also, even though they want to help us come out of our current challenge, what are you also doing to deal with the structural issues that has gotten us here in terms of our debt hitting the roof level, that has gotten us here that we are not mobilizing the right revenue, that has not been able to put the checks in place to ensure that there aren't overruns. I mean, look at our budget deficit. You look at the gap, and where we had the laws, where were all the institutions that were supposed to ensure that government doesn't overspend beyond a certain limit? So they are pushing for all these things to be put in place, paying of right tariffs. I mean, we can't cancel your debt when you continue to subsidize. Certain things where people can pay and all the rest, where you are subsidizing rich people. So they are pushing for these structural reforms so that 5 years from now, we wouldn't go for another IMF program, or to use the words of Professor Boki, we won't go in an ambulance. And therefore, you're pushing hard on some of these things to ensure that the reforms, the structural reforms that are put in place If you want debt relief, it is not going to be a blind check. It will come with some strict conditions because we didn't get you here, you got here. But also, if you listen to the IMF MD, she still stands by her point and argument that she believes that, yes, there is some level of externality that has contributed to the challenge. And that is why she thinks that Ghana must be helped to come out of this challenge.
Well, you've heard Professor Bokpin, like many other people, talk about the fact that the government is not trying to take a lot of the, a lot of these cuts itself. People are calling on, government to have a lean government, reduce expenditure and all of that. Do you get a sense that this is exactly what our external creditors are also calling for, that you need to check the size of your government and the expenditure you engage in?
I haven't gotten that clear message from some of these creditors as in cutting down the size of your government. I mean, the cutting down of the size of government is more of a signaling effect and what it does. But we all know where the cuts would impact on the GDP. We know where these areas are in terms of those steps that we have to take. I was having an engagement with Kukwati. I mean, there's a parliamentary forum that the World Bank puts together. So if you see some MPs here, it's not because of they are coming to get a bailout, but they are coming here because, I mean, there are CEOs meetings here. Once the time Professor Bobkin was even here as well, there are several engagements that are going. There's a parliamentary forum put together by the World Bank that they are here for meetings. And I was engaging with Kukwati, and he gave some signal, listen, when it gets to a point where the revenue is not coming, nobody is going to tell you that you have to take those deep cuts. So maybe events itself will push us into that corner where we have no option. And I'm just saying that these creditors are going to be tough on Ghana. So it is just a matter of time. If the revenue is not coming, don't forget that the governor of the Bank of Ghana has resolved that he is going to press ahead with the zero financing. So you are not going to get any free cash from the Bank of Ghana. If revenue is not coming, there have been concerns raised about these tax measures and whether they'll get us the revenue or not. So if the revenue is not coming, you can't go to the international market to borrow. The IMF program, the money that is coming in is for balance of payment support. And let's get it clear. Those who sit down and those ask that, where is the IMF money coming, and all the rest, that it is not budgetary support. It is going directly to the Bank of Ghana. Support our balance of payment needs. And if the governor has signaled that, listen, I'm going to be strict on zero financing, the revenue is not coming, I think that nobody would tell you that you can't be hungry. And you're sitting down hungry and you have a Bentley sitting down or in your garage and you say, I want to show people I'm rich. I think these cuts itself will come. Events will push government, will put pressure on government itself to do these adjustments. Nobody has to tell them.
Now, we understand that even the amount can go beyond the 3 billion. You were giving us an indication that some of these creditors might even come on board with some revenue. But let's talk about the what we are actually looking for. Are we looking for debt cancellation, or we are looking for a space, a fiscal space that we can operate in and pay back our debt later? What is it really that we are looking for?
I will cast my mind. I mean, if you engage some of these members in the parity that I've met here, you get that understanding of they are committed if they have to stretch this for us to get possibly a debt cancellation. But I remember that earlier this year, I spoke to the finance minister in an interview, and his argument was that their original aim is more of a fiscal space and restructuring the debt. If they're able to push out on these negotiations to get debt cancellation, that could be a plus. But their major task now is to see how the debt can be restructured with these creditors. If they're able to push hard to get the cancellation, that would be a plus on what they are doing or the work they are doing.
Interesting. So none of the creditors themselves have come up to say, well, we think that we need to look at debt cancellation like it happened in HIPC. None.
No, I don't think that any creditor going into a meeting of this sort would signal that they are going to cancel Ghana's debt. I mean, and that's why for us, I think that Kojo should appreciate this partial creditor committee that has been formed, because it's a first in a series of negotiations
George, hold on for me. Let me bring in Prof. Bokpin here on this particular instance. Prof, is it something you foresee happening, that our debts may be forgiven so we could then begin afresh?
Well, I lean towards George Yafi's comment. Remember that times are hard, and it's not exclusive to only Ghana. Even our bilateral countries that we are running to, they also have their challenges. Okay, so it's not going to be that straightforward. We know that with the external commercial, because government has taken advantage of the G20 framework of debt service suspension clause, ultimately when that process ends, it may end up in NPV neutral, meaning that there's no haircut essentially, or NPV negative, in which case external commercial creditors will take some haircut, and that will be the fiscal saving for us. It is probable that some countries, maybe China, may lean more towards debt risk profiling, okay? But that may not be enough. And I believe that where we are, and George Yafi also mentioned that, is the gravity of the problem that determines a certain response, and why IMF has not taken the staff level agreement to the board. But of course, we know that given when the staff level agreement was reached, I think December 12, 2022, and now a lot has happened, for which reason my considered view is that some assumptions may have to be validated, okay, which may impact some projections and all of that in the staff level agreement. So it's likely there may be some minimal adjustments to the staff level agreement before the board approves, if Ghana is able to secure that funding assurance from our bilateral and multilateral. We know that multilateral, largely World Bank, African Development Bank, yes, we know that Paris class creditors, yes, have shown that willingness. Committee has informed. The question is, if you estimate the gap, and without doing further adjustments, if you pick the 2023 budget alone, without adjusting for the fiscal savings from the domestic debt exchange, the funding gap there is over $5 billion. Okay, so you are looking at it that have we sufficiently ring-fenced funding such that when the IMF program is approved, the problem will not dwarf the program. That is where the issue is. How do we make the IMF program work? The IMF program can't work without a commitment to closing the funding gap. Now, this situation is different from when Ghana went to the IMF for our 16th IMF-supported program. The application was made, the call was made on April 6, I think April 6, 2014, and the program kicked in on April 3, 2015. That process, we didn't have to go through all of this because Ghana went for that program with market assets. Now we've lost market assets, both from the international capital market and then from the domestic market. And therefore, government itself in the 2023 budget had indicated that they hope to close the funding gap through concessionary funding, in which case, either it comes in the form of debt relief or fresh funding. And that is quite a lot to ask from your bilateral partners and even multilateral. That's a lot to ask. So that is why we are saying that you could make the load lighter for those who are willing to help you when you also demonstrate how well you are helping yourself. And you helping yourself here cannot and should not take only the form of raising more revenue. You should be looking at expenditure cuts, wasteful expenditure cuts. And look, there was a committee that was set up by the Minister of Finance himself, together with some rest of the individual bond holders. They did the costing. They provided the figures. where the savings could come from, where more revenue could come from. Why have we added that document to the literature book? What are we doing about it? Okay, so you see that Ghana itself is not helping itself enough to enable the help we are getting from external to be quite sufficient and quicker for us.
Interesting.
And take this. The government should know that we cannot tax our way out of this current problem. We cannot, and it will not work. Because if you look at the revenue targets in the 2023 budget alone, those estimates and projections were made before the draconian domestic debt exchange was applied. Okay? And if you look at the impairment losses that the financial institutions have to accommodate, even under a reduced discount rate, the Bank of Ghana, together with the Chartered Institute of Accountants Ghana, have to agree in order to mitigate the impact of the losses on the books of the bank, because eventually they have to agree on a discount rate between 15.67% and 21%. When consistent with the International Financial Reporting Standard 9, they should have used the market discount rate, which was in excess of 40%, right? If they had applied the FRS 9, I don't think many banks would have been able to survive. We've done this not only to banks. You are talking about the liquidity gap also, over 6 billion cedis. That would affect lending to private sector, to households. So where will your growth come from? And if growth is going to decelerate, it will have implications for your revenue generation. So when you put all these things together, perhaps the reason the IMF is lowering our growth projection for 2023 to 1.6% or so. Can you imagine what it means for your growth to decelerate to 1.6% from 2022 figures? Because the fiscal consolidation measures, heavily revenue-based, okay, would impose immediate costs, and the sacrifice will be growth, the sacrifice will be employment, the sacrifice will be income. So we need to manage the trade-off of how much revenue we can generate now consistent with our fiscal consolidation objectives, and then also preserving private sector competitiveness even as we move into greater implementation or deeper implementation of the African continental free trade area. You have to feel for Ghana, and you have to feel for private sector.
But bro, how do we generate enough revenue when private sector is already talking about the impact that 3 new tax bills will have on it? Some even proposing that more companies would have to fold up.
Yes, so is the approach. We know that Ghana's tax revenue to GDP ratio is low, right? We are doing 30% or below 14%. In fact, a study done by Gaspar, who is now with the IMF, has been with the IMF for a while now, fiscal affairs and all of that. If your revenue to GDP ratio exceeds, let's say, 12.8%, it should be accompanied by a certain level of growth in the subsequent years. In the case of Ghana, you cannot validate that because expenditure side is inefficient. So even the little that we have collected, we have not been able to use it efficiently to engineer growth in terms of the redistribution to enable inclusive growth, a greater economic transformation, and inclusive productivity growth. We have failed from that end. So in as much as we agree that we need to scale up in terms of revenue generation, Ghana's problem has been the strategy, the means to achieve that. And so far, we have adopted a lazy approach of burdening the faithful few or deepening the tax burden rather than broadening it. Okay, so it's more, tax to GDP ratio is low. The point of disagreement is the strategy to close it. And we are saying that the current approach or strategy, which burdens the faithful few or deepens the tax burden on the few who are faithful, is not the right way to go. And therefore, we must look at innovative ways of roping in the informal sector and increase the tax the revenue from that side, and also increase the number of direct income taxpayers. So far, we have less than 3 million or so Ghanaians who are paying direct income taxes. I think less than 3 million or so. out of estimated labor force of about 14 million. Okay, so that tells you that there's room to increase revenue generation without burdening the people feel. Then you want to look at politically connected businesses that import and through advanced ruling and all kinds of exemptions are not paying the right duties and customs at the port and all of that. So if you look at Ghana's port, the number of taxes alone, it makes it so expensive to import something into this country. And it's not that there's a clear strategy that we are imposing these taxes because we want to grow a substitute in the economy. No. Too many taxes. You pass here, there's tax. You stand up, there's tax. You sit down, there's tax. You lie down, there's tax. Why? There's no breathing space. How do you expect to grow out of this? Which country has grown out of this kind of tax policy and inefficient expenditure? I think we have studied enough to know that the way we are going will not lead us anywhere. Okay? There's no point speeding up if you are heading dangerously, right? I think we should be able to sit down, build consensus, and you will see that a lot of stakeholders will come on board. We have one country.
Prof, in terms of expanding the tax net, was that not why the e-levy was brought in, but no, it failed?
E-levy will not widen anything. E-levy is a way to steal money from people's pockets. Okay? It's not widening anything. E-levy doesn't meet even the basic principles of taxation. And I am sure if the IMF had its way, they will ask government to remove the e-levy. Okay? So we have said that we need to close the gap. We need to convert Ghana's tax gap to our advantage. The way to do so is not e-levy. The way to do so is not to increase the VAT rate to 12% and actually treat other levies that meet the requirements of VAT as levies so that through the back door you could collect more money from the citizens. That is not the way.
Prof, the education has been that, well, when the mason does a work for you, he doesn't pay any tax on it. But with e-levy, if you pay the person through the electronic mobile money transaction, then the government can get some taxes from there. Isn't that a way to bring on board a lot of the informal sector?
No. There are too many indirect tax handles in Ghana. No country has developed with this tax structure. When you have too many indirect tax handles, the inequality worsening effect is very high. And you can see the inequality data. Okay? And how should it be that, for instance, where you sit, after you have been faithful in paying your taxes to the state, income tax deducted, the disposable income is what you are left with. And when you send something to your grandmother in the village, you pay another levy on it. If your grandmother gets that money and she also sends something to someone, your grandmother pays something on that same amount. If that person also sends something to somebody, he also pays something. No, please tell me, where are we going with this kind of lifestyle? Okay, so we are saying that the Ghana, a small open economy like ours, we have almost 23 different tax handles. If you do the classification, majority of them are indirect tax handles. Indirect tax handles are lazy ways of raising revenue. If you look at emerging and advanced economies, their tax structure, they collect more revenue from direct income tax and then property tax. That is inequality reducing, as compared to the ones where you levy those taxes on consumption based and the rest of them, which affect the poor, the marginalized, and the socially excluded more, especially in a country where redistribution of that resources is also very weak and inefficient, and transfer mechanisms are very poor. Even when COVID came and Ghana decided to do more social protection, instead of directly sending the money to the people to buy the food and prepare it themselves, the state was rather cooking and distributing it to people. What level of efficiency can the state bring to bear when it takes on that responsibility? When Togo and other countries were through Momo doing direct transfers, that is easier to monitor, that is easier to audit. But if the state is preparing jollof rice, how do you audit that and the efficiency? When did the state become whatever in jollof rice?
So from how I understand it, even though the MD of IMF is saying that, well, external shocks were largely to blame for where Ghana finds itself, you believe largely it should be at the forefront of the managers of the economy.
Yeah, I do so. And when we do so, we are not in denial that Ghana was affected by this shock, COVID and Russia-Ukraine. That is not the position we hold. But what we are saying is that you will see some level of marginality in terms of how countries were impacted and have been impacted by this global shock. And you can look at, if you pick inflation, check inflation in Côte d'Ivoire, check food prices in Côte d'Ivoire. And if you compare that to Ghana, you may think that COVID-19, the virus actually originated from Ghana here. No. So we are saying that global shocks, they are saying global because the impact is pervasive. Okay? So no country is immune from that. But you also see differences in how one country is affected compared to what other countries. That is where the difference is. And that difference is largely due to the resilience of your local economy, which has more to do, it's actually a feedback on the efficacy of your domestic policy. So a good way of putting this is to say that this is external development revealing local reality.
Well, I mean, the early part of this week, we had some of your colleague economists predicting that the more this drags on for getting this deal from the IMF, Ghana may find itself in some harsher times. With the minister announcing the month of May as a time within which we're expected to get this deal from the IMF, are we still looking at this? There's a harsher times that will be facing Ghana?
Yeah, I lean towards that any delay is not good for us. Ghana is on borrowed time. Okay, and therefore time is of essence now. And with the reason a couple of days ago, we had maintained the position that the IMF, together with the Paris Club creditors, must look beyond the global geopolitics and the geo-economic fragmentation and close their ranks quite quickly and give Ghana a program. We have appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar we must go. The president has appealed to the West in his own judgment in terms of the global geopolitics, and to Caesar we have appealed, and we must go to Caesar, and Caesar must respond.
So, but is made that far from now?
Yes, I think that I see that from the perspective of the IMF, and also Paris Club creditors, or even China. Look, in all of this, we must not look at China's position as necessarily bad, and we should not paint China or make them look like they are a bad lender on the continent, right? It's been very helpful, right, in terms of infrastructure financing on the continent in the last 25 years. Take the continent and look at the footprint of China on the continent compared to Paris Club creditors, about 22 of them or so, right? But differences then exist in terms of how debt forgiveness should be treated. And it's not only China. The Asians have their own philosophy about debt forgiveness. When Ghana applied for HIPIC, we saw how Japan reacted, right? Okay, so there is that realization that time is not on our side. And every single sentence the IMF managing director makes, you see that the conclusion is that we are on borrowed time. Some countries are on borrowed time. They are hanging, and it's very obvious. Look, tell me in Ghana what is happening right now. Everything is practically on suspension. Budget execution is very low because revenue stream is very low. Right, so nothing is happening. All that we are doing now is that we are waiting for IMF program. There's a general slowdown in imports. You can see the traffic going down at the port, we are told. Right, that in itself may be helping the stability of the city. But for how long can you keep your economy in suspense like this? Okay, and therefore, I think the earlier we receive board approval, the better. Remember that it is not as though once the IMF approves the program, Ghana's problem will begin to disappear as though manna falling from heaven. It's work. Inbuilt in the IMF program will be work, will be fiscal reform, will be governance reform, structural reform, Of course, don't expect the IMF to tell your government to cut down the size. Maybe in secret they will tell them because they don't want to be seen to be interfering in how a country governs, because that is not part of their mandate. We must hold our own government accountable and in coming out with a size that we think we can sustain. That is up to us. We cannot expect the IMF to tell the president how many ministers he should appoint. It will be viewed to be an interference. Remember, during the State of the Nation address, the same president that was begging was actually saying that some countries are interfering in our affairs. You remember that in Parliament?
Yeah.
Okay, so the IMF doesn't want to be seen in that way. What manner of governance size, lean, large, whatever, countries should be able to revolve, right, reform along those lines and come to that optimal point. And if anybody says that we don't know what the optimal government size should be, and that is why we have more ministers, that should not be accepted. Okay, that is never a justification for the size. Côte d'Ivoire has about 31 ministers or 32 as we speak. It was 41, and in April 2022, Côte d'Ivoire took a decision to reduce the size, the number of ministers, size of government, essentially, central government, to 32. Okay, and check the size of government of Kagame. Okay, there are benchmarks. Okay, and we ourselves, we are not dumb. We are not like, it's not like we are not intelligent. If something is good, we can see. We can see. And I'm not expecting that any government after 2024 will have more than 40 ministers. We should reject that. We should not accept that. What is happening right now is that there's a moral hazard where people feel that going to the private sector or the real sector is harder to make money and have expensive lifestyle compared to joining politics. So you have very good people who could have helped in the real sector, private sector, transform things, who are in politics because that journey, that path is shorter. 4 years, you have everything you wanted. Why would you want to go to private sector and work for 35 years to have something that 4 years you can get by joining politics? So the kind of politics we do is encourages laziness, violence, because it's like, then it has to be do and die, because once you get the power, you can get everything that comes with it. There's very little moderation. Okay, and that's everybody wants to go to politics. And that is why it's going to get very aggressive. And if we are not careful, more violent, because there are people in government today that when they go into opposition, they have no alternative livelihood. So they'll do everything to hang on to power. There are people in opposition today that, look, without they coming to power, life means less to them.
So Prof, what do you think?
Load their lifestyle on the state first.
So, Prof, what must government do then to reduce the impact of the impact that delay will have on the economy as we still wait to hear from the IMF? We are not rest assured whether we'll get it or not, but as we wait, what must government do?
So I think that is what the problem is. You can see that from the beginning of the year to date, all that we are all doing, including government, is to wait for IMF program. The question is, so if there isn't anything that we can do on our own, so tell me, what is it that government is doing right now as we wait for IMF program? Nothing. And that's very sad.
Wow.
It's unfortunate that we have to get to this point.
But let's assume they're out of ideas. What should they do?
I think the starting point will be a national conversation on this in a manner that bridges the political divide also, stops religion, civil society, academic, and media. It is very, very important. When the Bible says that come let us reason, it's a very good reason. So come let us reason together. Let's bring ideas to the table. Let's see which one will work. Some may work in the medium to the long term. Some may work in the medium. Let's address them. Because, the confidence we are saying that we want to build and the policy credibility, you can also generate it from your domestic reforms that you undertake and people have confidence in it. Because we are all able to do that, we now have to lean on the credibility and the confidence IMF program brings. That is where we are. Because that confidence is what investors need to put their money in this economy. All of us, including maybe you're also included, we are all adopting the attitude of wait and see. And therefore, there's very little movement, activity going on. Okay. The point is that what is it that we can do? And I think we need to have that national conversation. It's very, very important. And I'm sure from there, we resolve what to do, what not to do, and we monitor it. George Yafi was just telling you that those Paris creditors, whatever they are giving us, they are going to monitor how it will be used. So that when we all meet together and agree on certain things and benchmarks and roadmap, we also put in place monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. The IMF program is going to be latent with program monitoring mechanisms, maybe every 6 months, some of them every quarter. And we have to report to our headmaster in Washington how well we are doing on those targets. That is where the discipline comes from. And that is why everybody is waiting for the IMF program before they even commit to supporting Ghana or investors bringing money, and even domestic private investors are waiting to see. It's because of that, because that brings some kind of discipline, that brings some kind of monitoring mechanism. Okay, and we failed to do that. In fact, it was, I say, and I've said it before, that it was a sad thing for Ghana that we went through the domestic debt exchange and traded off, and government accommodated fiscal savings in exchange for nothing. So domestic creditors did not ask for anything in exchange for the haircut, not head. They didn't cut their head, the haircut. We asked for nothing. So government got away with it. In Jamaica, they formed creditor committees. Part of the reform included fiscal responsibility and other things. If we don't ask for that, our government will never give that to us, because the politicians would always not avoid any opportunity to be accountable. Okay, so if we had formed a domestic creditor committee, we would have been able to negotiate with government from position of strength. We would have imposed certain monitoring mechanisms. Look, let me ask you, talk to the Bankers Association, talk to the Securities Association, talk to pensioners, individual bondholders who submitted their head for haircuts, whether they know how the fiscal savings will be used. Can they tell us? If we can. But that is why the West, the external, any CD dollar they give you, they will monitor how you use it. Even in the case of IFRIC, they told us we should use some for solid and other things. And we put sign board by it, IFRIC solid. We have to be able to have monitoring mechanisms that makes our government accountable. And this we must do regardless of which party is in power. Whether the party belongs to your tribe or not, we must do, because we must get to the point where we sacrifice party affiliation, ethnicity, tribe, whatever, for Ghana. Ghana needs to survive fight before any of us can survive.
And who must be part of this committee if it should come off?
Well, we forgot message, because government has concluded the domestic debt exchange. Okay, we made this proposal long ago that the major creditors needed to talk among themselves. Look, they could have made certain conditions. Do you know something? When TUC rose up and said that pensions should be exempted, I said, wow, that is a starting point. All that TUC together with other organized labor and the rest of us, we say is that reduce this number of government to this, expenditure to this. We are giving you 1 week. Otherwise, we are not going back to work. You will see that government will respond, because the development the West they have today, it was not just given. They asked for it. They fought for it. Our independence wasn't merely given. People fought for it. At some point, there was a disagreement whether we should have it now or we should wait more. But they said, the incumbents and the others said, we want it now. So what we have today as our freedom, independence, people lay down their lives for it. We have 8 hours of working in a day and 5 days of working. It wasn't like that at the beginning. People fought for it. Whatever reforms that we have today that is working, people fought for it.
Okay.
France, President of France just took a decision to increase the retirement age to 62. People were on the street.
Okay. Prof, I'm very grateful to you for your time and intellect in helping us understand the issues. So grateful to you. That's Professor Godfrey Bokpeng. He is an economist and a professor of finance at the University of Ghana. This has been our extensive coverage of the IMF World Bank Spring meeting currently underway in Washington, D.C. George Weafe joined us with the aftermath of that particular meeting between the Minister of Ghana and the Governor of the Bank of Ghana with our Eurobond creditors. And then Kofi Atta was also here with me in studio to help us break things down. Kofi, so as we wrap up this discussion, what would be your last words, your takeaway from that meeting between the Minister and the creditors?
Well, so extensively the talk has been around fiscal space. And it's not as if we've not had this before. Mind you, in 2020 and then 2021, when we had COVID and other things, we had monies that we're supposed to utilize. We got about 26 billion, Ghana cedis from all other people who decided to help us. COVID cost us 12 billion. So if you subtract 12 from 26, we are left with somewhere about 14 billion. So what did we do with that money? It's not as if we've not had this fiscal space before. We had it before, but we abused it. But this time around, we are going to have an external, person supervising the affairs of our economies.
That's why Prof is saying that instead of having an external, as in quote, watchdog, we should have it like internally, so that we don't get that we can never do it.
Who is going to monitor? Who is going to tell the finance minister that you need to do A, B, C, D at the end of every
Professor Bokpeng is calling for the establishment of a partial creditors committee, like what has happened. Yes.
It will be very, very difficult to get the result out of anything they will discuss in such meetings. But if you have the IMF coming on board with the, strict, supervision, you want liquidity, external liquidity from them. So if they tell you to move from A to B, you are willing to do so.
So we can never manage our own affairs.
It will be very difficult. I'm not saying we can't manage, but the results we will get from such, management from domestic people wouldn't be as significant as we'll get it from the IMF or any other person. So the IMF in the boat is an assurance. The IMF in the boat is a beautiful picture to, external creditors telling us that, there's a new person on board that is going to whip these people in line. They're not going to misuse their money. They're not going to balloon their deficit to any amount they want at any point in time. Because once we start with a 3 billion IMF program, at every point that we'll do a disbursement, just like Prof said, you have to do reviews. You have to write reports. Mind you, in 2015, when we qualified for $908 million, we only ended up being able to withdraw 600 million. The rest of 300 million, we couldn't because there were certain things we had to meet, conditions we had to meet before we get the 300. We couldn't do it. So with the IMF, you do A, you get B, you do C, you get D. If you don't do that, you're not going to get anything. And Zambia is a typical example. Restructure your debt, or we are not ready to start the 1.3 billion package for you.
All right, Isaac Kofi Atta is our in-house data and research analyst here at JoyNews. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more news here on the JoyNews channel. Stay with us.